a hidden truth behind the stage smile. Jimin saves Luca, Jungkook touches his hand, and a secret love collides with danger and revelation. The scream was swallowed by the roar of the crowd, but Jimin heard it anyway, sharp and wrong, slicing through the music just as the lights flared white and the stage shook beneath his feet. He smiled on cue, because that was what the world demanded of him, even as his heart lurched and his gaze snapped toward the dark corridor behind the LED wall where no camera ever lingered. The bass thundered, the choreography flowed, and his body moved on instinct, trained and perfect, while his mind fractured into urgency and fear. Somewhere behind the stage, someone was in trouble. Jimin knew that sound. He had heard it years ago, in a memory he tried not to revisit, a memory that smelled of cold concrete and iron. Jungkook was 3 steps behind him, breath steady, eyes sharp despite the chaos. He noticed the smallest change, the way Jimin's fingers trembled for half a beat before the next move, the way his smile tightened as if stitched on too carefully. When Jimin broke formation, it looked accidental to everyone else, a flourish, a creative liberty. Jungkook knew better. He followed without hesitation, slipping off stage as the crowd screamed louder, unaware that the real performance had just begun. The corridor was dim and smelled of dust and ozone from overheated cables. A young man lay crumpled near a stack of flight cases, blood darkening his sleeve. Luca, a trainee, barely old enough to carry the weight of his own dreams, let alone this terror. His eyes fluttered open when Jimin knelt beside him, hands already pressing against the wound with practiced precision. "It's going to be okay," Jimin said softly, his voice steady in a way that betrayed how much he had practiced calm. "Stay with me, breathe." Luca tried to speak, but his words dissolved into a cough. His fingers clawed weakly at Jimin's sleeve, fear raw and unmistakable. Jimin felt it like a blade in his chest, the old guilt stirring, the promise he had made to himself long ago that he would never look away again. Footsteps echoed. Jungkook appeared, eyes widening for a fraction of a second before controls snapped into place. He crouched beside them, tearing open a first aid kit with his teeth, hands moving fast. When his fingers brushed Jimin's, the contact sent a shock through both of them, a jolt of grounding and confession all at once. Jungkook didn't pull away. Neither did Jimin. "I've got you," Jungkook murmured, though it wasn't clear who he was talking to. Behind the stage, the music swelled to its climax, fireworks bursting as if the world were ending beautifully. Here in the shadows, Jimin worked to keep Luca conscious, whispering to him about trivial things, about the way the lights looked like stars, about how the crowd sounded like the ocean, anything to keep him tethered. Jungkook watched Jimin with a mixture of awe and fear. This was the part of Jimin no one ever saw, the part that carried scars beneath silk and smiles. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Security shouted. Hands reached out to lift Luca onto a stretcher. As they pulled him away, Luca's eyes found Jimin's one last time, gratitude and terror mingling there, and Jimin squeezed his hand gently, a silent vow passing between them. Only when Luca was gone did Jimin's strength falter. The adrenaline drained, leaving behind the weight of what could have been lost. He leaned back against the wall, breath shaking. Jungkook stood in front of him, close enough that Jimin could smell sweat and cologne and something unmistakably human. "You didn't hesitate," Jungkook said quietly. "You never do." Jimin laughed weakly. "Someone has to." Jungkook reached out, fingers brushing Jimin's hand again, slower this time, deliberate. The touch was small, almost invisible, but it carried years of unspoken words. In that moment, with the echo of applause bleeding through the walls, everything Jimin had hidden threatened to spill free. The fear of being seen, the longing to be held without masks, the truth behind the smile the world adored. "I know what you're carrying," Jungkook said, voice low. "You don't have to do it alone." Jimin looked at him, really looked, and for the first time that night, his smile softened into something real. The stage lights dimmed as the show ended, but behind the scenes, a different kind of revelation had begun, one that didn't need an audience to be true. By the time they stepped back into the light, Luca was safe, the danger past, and the secret between them pulsed quietly, alive and undeniable, waiting for the moment it would no longer need the shadows to survive. The hallway smelled of antiseptic and burnt dust long after the sirens faded, and Jimin stood under the flickering fluorescent light as if the stage had followed him into this narrow, unforgiving space. The roar of the crowd was gone now, replaced by a ringing silence that pressed against his skull. He wiped his hands on a towel someone had given him, but the faint trace of blood seemed to cling no matter how hard he scrubbed. Jungkook watched him from a few steps away, jaw tight, eyes burning with words he hadn't decided how to release. "You scared the hell out of me," he finally said, breaking the quiet like glass. "You disappear in the middle of a performance and don't even look back." Jimin didn't turn around. "I knew you. Follow." "That's not the point," Jungkook snapped, then exhaled sharply, reining himself in. He moved closer, lowering his voice. "What if something happened to you? What if they saw more than they should have?" Jimin laughed, but it was hollow. "They always see what they want, not what's real." He leaned against the wall, eyes closed, memories surging without permission. Luca's trembling hand, the sound of fear, the echo of his own past mistakes. Jungkook reached out again, stopping just short of touching him this time, as if afraid of crossing a line that had already been smudged beyond recognition. "You don't get to carry everything alone," Jungkook said, quieter now, raw. "Not anymore." Jimin opened his eyes. "You don't know what you're asking." "I know exactly what I'm asking," Jungkook replied. "I'm asking you to trust me." For a moment, the world narrowed to the space between them. Jimin's smile, the one perfected for cameras, cracked at the edges. "Trust gets people hurt," he said. "Look at Luca, look at me." Jungkook's voice sharpened. "And look at what you did. You saved him. You always run toward the fire, even when it burns you." "Because no one ran for me," Jimin shot back, the words ripping free before he could stop them. The confession hung heavy, dangerous. His breath hitched, and for the first time that night, he looked small, stripped of performance and polish. Jungkook didn't hesitate. He closed the distance and grabbed Jimin's wrist. Firm but gentle. "I'm here now," he said, eyes dark with intensity. "I've been here, you just keep pretending you don't need me." Jimin tried to pull away, but the touch grounded him, sent a shiver up his arm. "You don't understand how fragile this is," he whispered. "One wrong move and everything collapses. Careers, lives, us." The word slipped out before he could swallow it back. Jungkook's grip tightened, not in anger but in something dangerously close to relief. "So there is an us," he said, a faint, incredulous smile breaking through. "I thought I was losing my mind." Jimin's eyes glistened. "This isn't a game." "I know," Jungkook said. "That's why I'm still standing here." A manager's voice echoed down the hall, calling their names, dragging reality back into focus. Jimin straightened, instinctively rebuilding his walls. The smile returned, smaller now, careful. "We should go," he said. "They'll be asking questions." Jungkook didn't let go right away. "This doesn't end here," he murmured. "You can't pretend nothing happened." Jimin met his gaze, something fierce and vulnerable flickering there. "I don't want to pretend anymore," he admitted. "I'm just terrified of what happens if we stop." They stepped back into the aftermath of the concert, into cameras and concern and whispered rumors already taking shape. Luca was safe, they were told, stable and asking for Jimin by name. The relief hit him so hard he had to sit down, Jungkook dropping beside him without caring who saw. Later, in the quiet of the van, city lights streaking past like distant stars, Jungkook broke the silence again. "When you touched his hand," he said softly, "I saw it, the real you, and I realized if the world ever sees that, it will never let you go." Jimin leaned his head against the window, eyes reflecting neon and shadow. "Maybe that's what I'm afraid of," he replied. "Not losing everything, but finally being seen." Jungkook's hand found his again, this time without fear, without hiding. The touch was a promise, unspoken but blazing, and as the city swallowed them whole, Jimin knew that behind every smile from now on, there would be a truth he could no longer deny. The night refused to let them rest. Even after the van doors closed and the city lights blurred into meaningless streaks, the tension between them thickened instead of easing, coiling tight like a wire pulled too far. Jimin kept his head turned toward the window, jaw clenched, replaying Luca's bloodied sleeve, the way Jungkook's hand had anchored him, the way everything he had buried was clawing its way up. Jungkook broke first. "You always do that," he said, voice low but sharp enough to cut. "You shut down when things get real." Jimin didn't look at him. "I'm protecting us." "No," Jungkook snapped, leaning forward, elbows on his knees. "You're protecting the image, there's a difference." Jimin's laugh was bitter. "That image keeps us alive." "And it's killing you," Jungkook shot back. "I watched you tonight. When Luca screamed, you didn't even think. You ran. That wasn't the Jimin the world knows. That was the Jimin who bleeds." Jimin finally turned, eyes blazing. "And what do you want me to do about that? Confess everything. Burn it all down because it hurts too much to pretend." "I want you to stop lying to me," Jungkook said, his voice trembling now. "Every time you smile like nothing's wrong, it feels like you're pushing me out, like I'm just another fan watching from the dark." The words hit harder than Jimin expected. "That's not fair," he said, quieter. "You know how much you mean to me." "Then say it," Jungkook challenged. "Say it without hiding." The van slowed at a red light, the silence inside stretching, oppressive. Jimin's hands curled into fists on his lap. "If I say it," he whispered, "I won't be able to take it back." Jungkook leaned closer, their knees brushing. "I don't want you to." For a moment, Jimin looked like he might bolt, like a trapped animal searching for escape. Instead, he stayed. "I've spent my whole life smiling through fear," he said. "I learned early that if people see your cracks, they use them. Luca reminded me of that tonight. He reminded me of who I was before the stage, before the lights made everything look beautiful." Jungkook's voice softened. "You don't have to be that kid alone anymore." Jimin swallowed hard. "What if being with me ruins you?" Jungkook scoffed, hurt flashing across his face. "You think I haven't already chosen? Every time I look at you, I choose you, even when you pretend I don't." The van lurched forward again. Jimin reached out suddenly, gripping Jungkook's sleeve as if afraid he'd disappear. "I'm scared," he admitted, the words breaking free like a dam collapsing. "Scared that if this comes out, they'll tear us apart. Scared that I'll lose you anyway." Jungkook covered Jimin's hand with his own, thumb pressing into his pulse. "You almost lost Luca tonight," he said. "And you didn't hesitate. You didn't think about consequences. You acted because it was right. Why is this any different?" Because this involved love, Jimin thought. Because love was the one thing he had never learned how to survive. When they arrived at the building, cameras were already waiting, flashes exploding in the dark. Jimin pulled away instantly, mask snapping back into place, his smile flawless, untouchable. Jungkook watched it happen with something like grief. Inside, the tension followed them up the elevator, into the quiet hallway, into Jimin's room. The door barely closed before Jungkook spoke again, anger simmering. "You see, this is what I mean. 1 second you're honest, the next you're gone." Jimin spun around. "Do you think I enjoy this?" he snapped. "Do you think it's easy switching myself on and off just to survive?" Jungkook stepped closer, eyes dark, intense. "Then stop, just here, just with me." The room felt too small, the air heavy with everything unsaid. Jimin's breath shook. "If I let myself feel this," he said, voice breaking, "I don't know how to put it away again." Jungkook's hand lifted, hesitating inches from Jimin's face. "Maybe you're not supposed to." The touch finally came, fingers warm against Jimin's cheek, and something inside him shattered. He leaned into it despite himself, eyes closing, the smile dissolving into something painfully real. "You're dangerous," he whispered. Jungkook smiled sadly. "So are you." A phone buzzed on the table, startling them apart. A message. Luca was awake, asking for Jimin again, saying there was something he needed to tell them, something he'd heard before he collapsed. The room fell silent. Jimin stared at the screen, dread crawling up his spine. "What if he knows something?" he murmured. "What if this isn't over?" Jungkook's expression hardened, protective instincts flaring. "Then we face it, together." Jimin looked at him, truly looked, and realized there was no unringing this bell. Whatever Luca knew, whatever truths waited in the shadows, The line between performance and reality had already been crossed. And for the first time, Jimin wasn't sure he wanted to go back. Morning arrived without mercy. Pale light leaked through the curtains of the hospital corridor, turning the night's chaos into something almost ordinary, and that frightened Jimin more than the darkness ever had. He stood outside Luca's room, fingers hovering inches from the door handle, heart pounding like he was about to walk back onto the stage without music. Jungkook stood beside him, close enough that their shoulders brushed. "You don't have to do this alone," he said quietly. Jimin exhaled. "You keep saying that like I know how to believe it." The door opened before either of them could move. Luca lay propped against white pillows, face pale but eyes sharp, far more aware than Jimin expected. When he saw Jimin, his lips trembled into a weak smile. "You came." "Of course," Jimin replied, stepping inside, his voice gentler than it had been in days. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by reality," Luca said, glancing at Jungkook, then back at Jimin. "But I remember everything." The air shifted. Jungkook leaned against the wall, arms crossed, jaw tense. "What do you remember?" he asked. Luca swallowed. "Before I fell, I heard people talking backstage. They weren't staff. They were arguing. One of them said your name, Jimin, said you'd be easier to control if someone got hurt." Silence slammed into the room. Jimin felt cold spread through his chest. "Control me," he whispered. "They knew you, Run," Luca said. "They said you always do." Jungkook's eyes darkened. "Who were they?" Luca shook his head. "I didn't see their faces, but they talked about leaks, about secrets worth more than contracts." Jimin closed his eyes, memories snapping into place, whispers, odd glances, pressure disguised as concern. He opened them again, something fierce burning through the fear. "They used you to get to me," he said. "I'm so sorry." Luca reached for his hand. "You saved me, that's all that matters." Outside the room, the tension exploded. Jungkook paced the hallway, running a hand through his hair. "This is bigger than rumors," he said. "Someone's watching you, watching us." Jimin leaned against the wall, the weight of it pressing down. "This is what I was afraid of," he admitted. "Every time I care, someone uses it against me." Jungkook stopped in front of him. "Then stop letting them decide the rules." Jimin laughed softly, incredulous. "You make it sound so easy." "It's not," Jungkook said. "But hiding isn't keeping you safe anymore. Look at Luca, look at us." Jimin met his gaze. "And if they expose everything, if they tear us apart publicly?" Jungkook's voice dropped, intense. "Then let them try. I'm tired of pretending my heart doesn't exist." The words hit hard, controversial even in the quiet hall. Jimin's breath caught. "You don't understand what you're risking." "I do," Jungkook said. "I just don't care anymore." Later that day, news broke, carefully worded statements, reassurances, a promise of investigation. Cameras crowded the entrance. Questions flew like knives. Jimin stood beside Jungkook, smiling again, but this time the smile felt different, heavier, almost defiant. In the privacy of the car, Jimin finally spoke. "If this turns ugly," he said, "I don't want you dragged down with me." Jungkook scoffed. "Too late." Jimin looked at him, really looked, and something inside him shifted. "I've always been afraid that if I chose myself, I'd lose everything." Jungkook reached for his hand without hesitation. "Maybe choosing yourself is how you stop losing." That night, alone in his room, Jimin stood in front of the mirror. The smile came naturally, but this time it didn't hide the cracks, it framed them. He thought of Luca's courage, Jungkook's stubborn honesty, the unseen enemies who thought they knew him. Behind the smile of the stage, something stronger had begun to form. Not just fear, not just love, but resolve. The silence before the press conference felt louder than any stadium. Jimin stood behind the curtain, adjusting his jacket with fingers that barely hid their tremor, the muffled hum of reporters bleeding through the walls like a living thing. He could smell the sharp tang of coffee and nerves, hear the scrape of chairs, feel the weight of expectation pressing against his ribs. Jungkook stepped in front of him, close, blocking out the world. "Look at me," he said, low and firm. Jimin did, The intensity in Jungkook's eyes steadied him, even as it ignited something dangerous. "If this goes wrong," Jimin murmured, "they'll say it's my fault." Jungkook's jaw tightened. "They say that about you even when you breathe wrong. I'm done letting them write our story." "Our," Jimin echoed, a quiet, trembling smile breaking through. A staff member signaled, 5 minutes. Jimin's voice dropped. "They're going to ask about Luca, about the rumors, about why you were with me that night." "Then tell the truth," Jungkook replied. "Or don't, but don't lie to yourself." The curtain rustled. The noise surged. Jimin inhaled, the way he did before stepping into choreography that could break him if he hesitated. This time, there was no music to guide him. They walked out together. Flashes detonated. Questions collided. Jimin smiled, instinctive, brilliant, and for a heartbeat the world snapped back into its familiar shape. Then a reporter's voice cut through, sharp and cruel. "Jimin, sources claim the incident backstage was staged, that Luca was used to divert attention from internal conflicts. Care to respond?" The smile faltered. Jimin felt heat flood his face, anger and grief tangling. He opened his mouth, rehearsed phrases crowding his tongue. Jungkook stepped forward first. "That's a lie," Jungkook said, calm and devastatingly clear. "A real person was hurt, he was scared, and Jimin saved him." Gasps rippled. Another voice shot up. "Are you speaking as a witness or something more?" Jimin's pulse thundered. He glanced at Jungkook, a silent plea flickering, "Don't, not yet." Jungkook met his eyes and made a choice. "I'm speaking as someone who refuses to watch the truth be buried." The room erupted. Jimin reached out without thinking, fingers brushing Jungkook's sleeve, grounding himself in the reality of that presence. He stepped forward now, voice steady but stripped of polish. "Luca was targeted," Jimin said. "Not for publicity, not for drama, for control, and that ends now." A reporter leaned in, relentless. "Control over what exactly?" Jimin felt the old fear rise, the instinct to deflect, to smile and glide away. He didn't. "Over silence," he replied. "Over people who care too much to look away." The conference dissolved into chaos. Statements were cut short. They were ushered out through a side exit, the air outside cool and sharp against overheated skin. In the car, the adrenaline crashed, leaving behind shaking breaths and unspoken words. Jimin broke first, laughter bubbling up, brittle and stunned. "You really did it." Jungkook leaned back, eyes closed for a second. "I warned you." "They're going to tear this apart," Jimin said. "Every frame, every word." Jungkook opened his eyes, looking straight at him. "Let them. I meant what I said." The car stopped. Privacy returned like a held breath finally released. Jimin turned fully toward Jungkook, emotions cresting. "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to," Jungkook said. "There's a difference." Jimin's voice dropped raw. "Do you know how long I've been waiting to hear that?" Jungkook's hand found his, unapologetic now. "Then stop waiting." The touch sparked heat, urgency. Jimin leaned in, stopping just short, forehead nearly touching Jungkook. "If we cross this line," he whispered, "there's no pretending anymore." Jungkook smiled, fierce and tender. "Good." The kiss didn't happen. Instead, Jimin pulled back, tears threatening. "I'm not ready to be brave all the time." Jungkook squeezed his hand. "You don't have to be, just be honest." That night, Jimin visited Luca again. The room was quiet, machines humming softly. Luca looked stronger, eyes bright. "I saw the news," he said. "You didn't hide." Jimin sat beside him. "I almost did." "But you didn't," Luca replied. "That matters." Walking out of the hospital, Jimin felt something loosen inside him. The fear was still there, but it no longer ruled him. Jungkook waited by the door, hands in his pockets, posture relaxed in a way that felt new. "Ready?" Jungkook asked. Jimin nodded. "I think I am." As they stepped into the night, no cameras waiting this time, Jimin realized that the smile he wore wasn't armor anymore. It was a choice. And behind it, for the first time, he wasn't hiding. He was standing. The storm didn't break all at once. It crept in through notifications vibrating endlessly on Jimin's phone. through Jungkook's name trending beside words that felt like knives, through headlines that pretended neutrality while sharpening their edges. By the time night fell, the world had already decided who they were allowed to be. Jimin sat on the edge of the bed, phone face down, shoulders tense. "They're dissecting everything," he said quietly. "The way you spoke, the way I stood next to you, they're saying it's a distraction, or worse." Jungkook leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, eyes blazing. "Let them talk." "You say that like words don't hurt," Jimin snapped, then immediately softened, guilt flashing across his face. "I'm sorry, this is familiar. This is how it starts." Jungkook stepped closer. "Then tell me how it ends." Jimin laughed bitterly. "Usually, with me apologizing for something I didn't do." Jungkook shook his head. "Not this time." The room felt charged, every inch humming with unspent emotion. Jimin stood, packing. "They're questioning why you spoke for me. They're asking what right you had." Jungkook stopped him by grabbing his arm, turning him gently but firmly. "Because I love you," he said, the words dropping like a live wire between them. Jimin froze, the air left his lungs. "You can't just say that," he whispered, eyes wide, terrified and aching all at once. "I just did," Jungkook replied. His voice didn't waver, but his eyes did, too honest, too exposed. "I'm done pretending it's something smaller." Jimin pulled his arm free, running a hand through his hair. "Do you know what that costs?" he asked, voice shaking. "If anyone hears you, if this leaks." "Then it leaks," Jungkook said fiercely. "I'm not ashamed of loving you. I'm ashamed of hiding like it's something ugly." Jimin turned away, tears burning. "I've built my entire life on control," he admitted. "On knowing exactly how much of myself I can show without losing everything. And you're asking me to let it all go." "I'm asking you to let me in," Jungkook said softly. "There's a difference." A knock at the door shattered the moment. A manager's voice, tense, urgent. "We need to talk, now." The meeting room was cold, glass walls reflecting distorted versions of themselves. The manager didn't sit. "There's pressure," he said bluntly. "Sponsors are nervous. The board wants reassurance." "Reassurance of what?" Jungkook demanded. "That nothing inappropriate is happening," the manager replied, eyes flicking between them. "That the narrative stays clean." Jimin felt something snap. "Clean," he echoed. "Is that what you call silence?" The manager's jaw tightened. "I'm asking you to be careful." Jungkook leaned forward. "No," he said. "You're asking us to lie." Silence fell heavy. The manager exhaled. "If you don't, there will be consequences." Jimin stood slowly, heart pounding but spine straight. "There have always been consequences," he said. "We've just been the ones paying them." They left without another word. Outside, the city breathed around them, alive and indifferent. Jimin stopped under a streetlight, face illuminated, raw and real. "You meant it," he said to Jungkook. "What you said back there." "Yes," Jungkook answered, "and I'll say it again if I have to." Jimin's voice cracked. "I don't know how to be loved without fear." Jungkook stepped closer, hands warm on Jimin's shoulders. "Then we learn together." Jimin searched his face, searching for doubt, for hesitation. He found none. Slowly, like stepping off a cliff and trusting the fall, he leaned in. Their foreheads touched, breaths mingling, the world narrowing to this fragile, defiant moment. "I love you too," Jimin whispered, the confession breaking him open. They stayed like that for a long time, not kissing, not hiding, just holding the truth between them like something precious and terrifying. Around them, the noise continued, rumors, backlash, demands. But for the first time, Jimin didn't feel alone inside it. Behind the smile the world demanded, a deeper courage had taken root. And no matter how loud the storm grew, it was no longer something he had to face by himself. The morning after their confession arrived heavy and unforgiving, dragging reality in behind it like a shadow that refused to stay quiet. Jimin woke to the soft hum of the city and Jungkook's presence beside him, solid and warm, an anchor he hadn't realized he'd been craving his entire life. For a fleeting second, peace existed. Then the phone buzzed. Jimin didn't have to look to know. "It's starting," he murmured. Jungkook shifted, eyes opening slowly. Let it. Jimin sat up, running a hand over his face. You don't understand how fast this can spiral. Jungkook propped himself up on one elbow. Then show me, don't shut me out. The screen flooded with messages. Emergency meeting. Immediate response needed. Damage control. Jimin swallowed hard. They want us separated today. Different schedules, different cars. Jungkook's expression hardened. Of course they do. They're saying it's for safety, Jimin continued, voice flat. For optics. Jungkook scoffed. They always hide fear behind polite words. When they arrived at the building, the atmosphere had changed. Eyes lingered too long. Conversations cut short. Jimin felt it crawling under his skin, that old, familiar pressure to behave, to comply, to survive. In the elevator, Jungkook reached for his hand. Jimin hesitated only a second before letting him. A senior executive didn't bother with greetings. What happened at the press conference was unacceptable, he said sharply. You crossed lines. Jungkook stepped forward. We told the truth. You told your version, the executive snapped. And now the narrative is out of control. Jimin felt something ignite in his chest. The narrative was never ours, he said quietly. It was just convenient when we stayed silent. The executive's gaze sharpened. Are you admitting to something inappropriate? Jungkook laughed, incredulous. Inappropriate for caring. For jeopardizing everything we've built, the man shot back. Jimin's voice shook, but it didn't break. Everything you built was on our backs. Silence fell thick and volatile. The executive exhaled slowly. You need to make a choice, he said. Public denial, distance, or consequences. Jungkook turned to Jimin, eyes blazing. Don't, he warned softly. Don't choose fear again. Jimin closed his eyes, years of discipline and sacrifice pressing in. When he opened them, something had changed. I won't deny what's real, he said. Not anymore. The fallout was immediate. Meetings canceled. Sponsors wavering. Headlines exploding with speculation and outrage. Some fans defended them fiercely, others felt betrayed. Jimin watched it all unfold like a storm he could no longer outrun. That night they sat on the floor of Jungkook's apartment, backs against the couch, city lights flickering like distant fires. I'm angry, Jimin admitted. At them, at myself, at how long I let this control me. Jungkook's voice was raw. I'm scared, he said, but I'd rather be scared with you than numb without you. Jimin laughed softly, tears slipping free. You're ruining me. Jungkook smiled sadly. Good, you were never meant to be untouched. A call came through from the hospital. Luca wanted to see them both. When they arrived, Luca looked stronger, defiant even. They tried to scare me into silence, he said. I said no. Jimin's breath caught. You don't have to do this. I want to, Luca replied. You showed me what courage looks like. Walking out of the hospital, Jimin felt something settle into place. The world hadn't softened. The risks hadn't vanished. But his spine was straighter, his steps surer. Later, standing on the balcony as night swallowed the city, Jungkook slipped his arms around Jimin from behind. No matter what happens next, he whispered, I don't regret a single word. Jimin leaned back into him, eyes closing, smile quiet and unguarded. Neither do I. Behind the stage lights, behind the headlines and the fear, love had stopped being a secret. And even if the world wasn't ready, Jimin finally was. The end did not arrive with applause. It came quietly, almost gently, in the space where fear used to live. The final statement was released at dawn. Not polished, not rehearsed into emptiness, but honest in a way that made the world pause. It spoke of truth, of boundaries crossed by power, of a young man hurt and saved, of silence that had gone on too long. Names were not thrown like weapons, but responsibility was no longer hidden behind smiles. Jimin read it once, then again, hands steady in a way that surprised him. Jungkook watched from across the room, reading Jimin's face instead of the screen. It's done, Jungkook said softly. Jimin nodded. Whatever comes next, this part is over. The backlash was loud, then louder, then slowly, unevenly, it changed. Some doors closed. Others opened unexpectedly. Lucas spoke bravely, publicly, his voice shaking but unbroken. Investigations followed. Apologies that once felt impossible were suddenly offered. Not all were sincere, not all wounds healed, but the truth no longer belonged to the shadows. On the night of their first performance after everything, Jimin stood alone backstage, lights bleeding through the curtain like a heartbeat. His reflection stared back at him, familiar yet different. The smile came, but it didn't feel like armor anymore. It felt like choice. Jungkook joined him, fingers brushing his hand in a way that no longer hid. "Still scared?" he asked. Jimin smiled, smaller, realer. "Yes." Jungkook squeezed his hand. "Good, means it matters." When Jimin stepped onto the stage, the crowd roared, not blind, not unaware, but present. He sang not to escape himself, but to inhabit himself fully. Every note carried the weight of what he had lost and what he had kept. When his eyes met Jungkook's across the stage, there was no code, no secrecy, just understanding. After the lights dimmed and the noise faded, they walked out into the night together, hands brushing, shoulders aligned. No cameras followed. No explanations were needed. Later, in the quiet of home, Jimin rested his head against Jungkook's chest, listening to a steady heartbeat that felt like a promise kept. "I used to think surviving meant smiling no matter what," he murmured. Jungkook kissed his hair. "And now?" "Now I know it means telling the truth," Jimin said, "even when my voice shakes." Behind the smile of the stage, there would always be scars. But there was also love, chosen, spoken, unhidden. And for the first time, that was enough.